Nothing is free. There was once a baker in a small town in America. The baker was not a very kind man. He never gave his customers any more bread than necessary for their money, and he never smiled, but he was a very good baker. His bread was the softest bread that you could imagine. Sometimes customers paid for their bread and started eating it in the shop. And his cakes were good. His cakes were very delicious. People came to his shop from all over town. When they walked down the street, they smelled the baker's wonderful bread and his delicious cakes, and they walked right into his shop. But not everyone came inside. Some people just stood outside the shop smelling and looking in through the window. The baker didn't like this. Their stomachs are full of the smell of the bread. I'm giving them a free lunch. He was grumpy, huh? And I get nothing for my hard work, he said to himself. Perhaps there's some way to put those delicious smells into bottles. Then I can sell them just like I sell my bread. Y'all, I hesitate because I'm waiting for the page to turn on my tablet. One winter morning, very early, the baker was in the shop making bread. He wasn't singing happily while he was working. He was complaining to himself about getting up early in the cold weather. And about anything that came to his head. In the middle of all this, he looked up and saw someone looking through the window. It was a young man wearing an old coat. He was looking at the baker's bread, and he was hungry. He was smelling the fresh bread and smiling. When the baker saw him, he felt very angry. That thief outside my shop has a stomach full of smell. My bread, it's free breakfast. I get nothing for my hard work while he steals my smells. The old man didn't move. He just stood there, closed his eyes, and smelt the fresh bread happily. The baker was really angry now. He walked across the shop, opened the door, and shouted out, "Man, pay me. Pay me." "Pay you for what?" asked the young man in great surprise. "From the smell that you've stolen," replied the baker. "But I've stolen nothing. I'm only smelling the air. The air is free," said the hungry young man. "It's not free when it's full of the smell from my shop," replied the baker. "Pay me now or I'll call the police." When the young man didn't pay, the baker took him by the coat. And pulled him through the snow to the judge's house. He knocked on the door. After a long time, the judge opened the door in his night clothes. He looked at the baker and the hungry young man standing outside the street. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. What could be so important this early in the day? "The man is a thief. He stole the smell from my shop," said the baker. The judge was surprised, but he said, "Come in and tell me the story." But first, give me time to get dressed. He went back in the house, and after a few minutes, he came back and took them inside. They all sat down together around a large table. "All right, tell me everything. Baker, you start," said the judge. He listened quietly. First, the baker told him all about the hungry man who stole all his smells. The judge went on listening when the young man told him the air was free and that any man could have as much as he wanted. When they finished telling their stories, the judge was silent for a few minutes. The baker started telling him again of how the other man took all his smells without pay. "Stop, be quiet. I've decided what we'll do," said the judge. "Young man, do you have any money?" The young man put his hands in his pocket and took out a few coins. He showed them to the judge and said, "Sir, this is all the money that I have in the whole world." "Give those coins to me," said the judge. The young man put them into the judge's hand. "I've listened carefully to both of the stories," began the judge. "It's true that the smells were coming out of the baker's shop. And the smells belong to the baker. And it's also true that the young man took his smells without pay for them. And so I say that the young man has to pay the baker for the smells that he took." The baker smiled. Perhaps for the very first time in his life, he held out his hand at once for the money. But the judge didn't give him the coins. "Baker, listen, and listen carefully," he said. He shook the coins in his hand. And they clinked together. That can pay you for smells," he said to the baker. "Give me the coins, sir," said the baker, not smiling anymore. "No," said the judge. "I've decided that the sound of the money is the best way to pay for the smells of the bread." And with that, he gave hang on just a second, y'all. Oh, this always messes up when I'm trying to read these stories. I love these little stories. "I've decided that the sound of the money is the best way to pay for the smell of the bread." And with that, he gave the coins back to the poor young man and told him to go home. You think the baker learned a lesson? That if the boy was stealing the smells, the sound of the money for payment was good enough? I thought that was kind of a cute story. I'd never heard that before. Just wanted to share with y'all. Love y'all. Be blessed. Don't forget to say your prayers. And hopefully you learned the moral of the story.